Hey guys, this is Pat Divilly and you are very welcome to episode number 218 of the Pat Divilly podcast. Hello and welcome back to the podcast, episode number 218. I'm sat down in front of the microphone here and it feels foreign to be recording a solo cast. I've not been doing too many of these in recent months, but hoping today I can share some useful ideas around upgraded communication, some of the things I've learned in recent years and some of the things I'm trying to put into practice on a consistent basis to improve how I communicate with others, both those close to me and also those who challenge me. Sometimes the people close to me challenge me. And so again, I hope these ideas might be supportive in your own life. It's been a while since I've done a couple of solo casts over the last number of months, but not as many as I was doing. Anyone who's a frequent listener of the podcast might remember up to about episode 180. Most of the episodes were solo casts. And in the last 40 or so episodes, I've been doing more conversations and interviews. That was partially a curiosity and a wanting to connect with new people and just have those conversations. And then the other part of that was just struggling a bit with my own mental health the last couple of months and struggling to find the energy and the motivation to sit down and record on my own. And so there was a bit of an accountability piece that when I was interviewing someone, I had to sit through the conversation. I make it sound like it was difficult. I enjoyed sitting through those conversations, but I had to show up. And with the solo cast, there was more of an accountability piece needed on my side. So yeah, I had struggled for the last couple of months. I mentioned that on social media. I mentioned that on a recent episode of the podcast and was met with lots of support and kind words. So big thank you to everyone who reached out. Feeling much more grounded, much more centered in myself now. Just some changes that I made and just being patient with myself and riding the wave and coming out the far side. So anyone who's listening and caught in the dip, caught in the struggle, keep the faith, look after yourself, be patient with yourself and gentle with yourself and trust that the sun will come up and things will come good again. They always do. So today's solo cast, we'll get into it in just a minute. I want to share a couple of updates first. First and foremost, excited to announce I've got 2 upcoming retreats. It's been over 2 years since I've got to do a retreat. So I'm going to be hosting a 3-day retreat for men, September 17th, 18th and 19th, and then a mixed retreat, October 8th, 9th and 10th. You can check out the links in the description to this podcast if you'd like to find out more. These 3-day retreats are a chance to come together with great people, a lot of time in nature, healing breathwork, meditation, cold immersion. We've got obviously personal development work, meditation, group dinners, lunches and breakfasts. So amazing immersive 3-day weekends for personal development, healing and connection. Again, September 17th, 18th and 19th for the men's group, and then October 8th, 9th and 10th for the mixed group. Check out the links in the description if you'd like to join me for 3-day immersive retreats. I'm also doing a workshop online, an introduction to shadow work. That's happening August 28th. Again, you can check that out in the link in the description to this bio. I have to do all my little ads here because I'm not on social media. So this is how I can let people know about what's coming up. So again, an introduction to shadow work, 6-hour workshop happening online, August 28th. You can check out the link in the description if you'd like to learn more about that. Okay, that is it. 6 ideas I'm going to share today. Before sharing them, here's 2 quick notes from my show sponsors, and then we'll get right into it. Did you know over 6 million people in Ireland and the UK take CBD? The main reason so many people take CBD is because it's a great natural food supplement that supports a healthy mind and body, and more specifically can help you sleep, reduce anxiety and stress, and reduce inflammation or pain in the body. This podcast is sponsored by Ethos, an Irish CBD brand who currently have 3 CBD oil ranges, Natural, Balance and Sleep, which can be purchased online at ethos-cbd.com or in pharmacy and health food stores. I take Ethos CBD oil every day because I know it's good for me and I find it particularly good for my sleep. I'm delighted to partner with the guys and give all podcast listeners access to a 15% discount code for Ethos CBD oils and a downloadable day and night journal which I curated with the guys to help you set good intentions for your day and reflect before bed. I have included a link in this podcast show notes where you can access these. Also, if you're interested in learning more about the science and benefits of CBD, be sure to check out episode number 190 of the podcast where I had an in-depth conversation with Fergus, one of the co-founders of Ethos. Today's episode of the podcast is sponsored by Apollo Health and Wellness, Galway's premier health and wellness centre. Apollo offer recovery and spa packages combining different services that tailor toward your needs. If you're trying to just relax or recover from an intensive training session, or you're looking for a day out to unwind, Apollo have you covered. They've got a range of services including a private sauna, hot tub, ice baths, compression therapy, cryotherapy, and their float tanks. I'm a huge fan of the float tank, have been using it for the last 2 years. And I'm delighted now that they've also got the sauna, ice bath, hot tub, etc., which makes for a great full day out. All podcast listeners will get 10% off any of Apollo's services or packages by simply using the discount code PAT10 at checkout. Visit apollohealthandwellness.ie for more. Okay, ads and announcements out of the way. Let's get into these 6 ideas around upgraded communication. As a starting point, worth mentioning or worth noting, this was essential to mention or note that the person we'll always communicate with the most is ourselves. We're constantly communicating with ourselves, either consciously or unconsciously. There's thousands of stories, thoughts, beliefs, and assumptions running through our minds on a daily basis. And these are the cornerstone of communication with others. I often reference the CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy chart of this kind of cycle that we see where the thoughts that we have an impact on how we feel. Our feelings have an impact on how we act, and then those actions have an impact on the results that we see in life. So to give an example of that in terms of communication with others, if I have an assumption that my colleague in work doesn't like me because I don't talk very much when I'm around them, then that thought of my colleague not liking me could trigger a feeling of sadness or a feeling of resentment, maybe. And when I feel sad or resentful toward my colleague, the action that I take as a result is I distance myself further from that person, and I shut down, and I just kind of become more introverted around the office. And then as a result of that action of shutting down around this person, the communication doesn't improve in any way. In fact, it gets worse. And there's more mind reading going on, and there's less communication going on. And so this becomes a vicious cycle where now I believe the thought even more that my colleague doesn't like me. So when we look at this, if you were to imagine that we could take a step back and just find a little bit of perspective and look at the evidence and examine what's actually happening. So I noticed that my colleague is a little quiet and doesn't seem to be talking much. And the assumption I've jumped to is that they don't like me. If I could find a bit of perspective and say, well, wait a second, maybe the person has 100 other things going on. Maybe they've got some stuff going on at home that's got them stressed. Maybe they're overwhelmed. Maybe they're just feeling a little bit off today. Maybe they're shy. Maybe they're reserved. Maybe they have the same assumption that I have, that I don't like them. There could be so many different things going on. And as I start to explore these different options and get a little bit creative maybe, and just create a bit of space for my assumption, now I maybe have a different feeling. You know, when I entertain that thought that maybe they've got other stuff going on in their life, maybe my new feeling, rather than resentment, is compassion. And when I have a new feeling of compassion, the action I take is probably going to be different. And the action in this case maybe is, as I feel compassion for this person, I'm just a bit warmer. I smile a bit more. I'm a bit more welcoming. I'm a little less judgmental. And I kind of lean in rather than lean away from them. And as a result, I notice they open up a little bit more. And this new cycle forms. So this is just to give an example before even getting into the 6 principles today of the impact that our thoughts have. And again, we're building stories all the time about ourselves, about other people, about the world. And we have to recognize that, I think, in communication to others, that we're constantly not only communicating with the other person, but first communicating with ourselves. Oftentimes building assumptions on what the other person's thinking, feeling, doing, saying, how they're judging us, if they're judging us, etc. So with that in mind, the first concept or first idea today is just to be very aware of the fact that we all have a different worldview. Everybody walking this earth has got a different worldview. And the way that we show up in the world is based on our worldview. To give an example of this, and hopefully this will make sense as I describe it, if you were to imagine that there's 10 people or 12 people sat in a circle, and I'm sat on one side of the circle, there's a couple of people around me, and then you're sat on the opposite side of the circle to me. And from where I'm sitting, I can see a couple of items placed in the middle of the circle. The first thing I see is a football, and then beyond the football, I see a candle, and then next I see a box of pens. So again, from my perspective, from where I'm sitting in the circle, I see a football, and then a candle, and then a box of pens. So the facilitator says, what do you see in the circle? I see a football, a candle, a box of pens, in that order. And then you're sat directly opposite me. And the facilitator asks you, what do you see in the circle? Your response is, well, I see a box of pens and then a candle and then a football. So you see the opposite to me. If the question was who's right and who's wrong, the answer will be neither of us are right or wrong. We're just seeing things through our perspective. And we could sit opposite each other and argue with one another for the rest of our lives about who's right and who's wrong and stay, rooted in our position, unwilling to move, unwilling to get up out of our seat and look from a different perspective. Or we could get up and gently walk around the other side of the circle and see one another's view and then come back and then have this kind of more rounded perspective, I guess. And so this is the first concept. We all have a different worldview, and our worldview is based on so many different things, from the environment that we grew up in to, the influences that we've had throughout our life, to the things. I think really what our worldview is comes down to is our worldview is based on the things that we value in life and the things that we fear in life. We want to move toward the things that we value, and we want to move away from the things that we fear. And so if something that I value is not on your values list, maybe we're going to clash in certain respects, unless we can, find that means of stepping up from our place in the circle, taking a walk around, and effectively walking a mile in the other person's shoes. Is the old expression, walking a mile in the other person's shoes. And with this in mind, with the worldview piece, and recognize it again, number one, we all see the world through a different set of eyes. We have no idea of one another's background or fears or values or, anything else. And, one of the biggest issues I think there is in the world today is this black and white thinking, where someone's a good person or a bad person, or they're right or they're wrong. And there's all this clickbaity stuff where everything's like dumbed down to a stupid level, where we just lose perspective because we've just got so much information coming at us. We see these short headlines, these clickbait titles, people are villainized or they're made heroes. There's a quote that says something to the effect of, everyone dies a hero or lives long enough to become the villain, something like that. Maybe I butchered that a little bit, but we lose the perspective. A lot of people struggle to be friends with people that hold different opinions to them. And there's a lot of judgment. And with this worldview piece, when I recognize that everyone's got a different worldview, there's an invitation there for me to bring a sense of curiosity to why other people see the world through the eyes that they see them through, rather than a judgment of how the other person, quote unquote, should see the world. But with this in mind, we can start thinking about the what, the how, and the why. The what, the how, and the why. So again, we all have a different worldview, and our worldview is going to impact how we communicate with others. And other people's worldview is going to impact how they communicate with us. Because there's the what, the how, and the why. So the what is the words that people use when they communicate. The what is the words that people use when they communicate. So maybe my partner comes home, or I come home from work and my partner says to me, you never take time for me, and I'm getting fed up of it. You prioritize your work and all you care about is your work. Okay, so I've heard the words. I've heard what someone has said to me, what my partner has said to me. You never take time for me, you prioritize your work over me, and all you care about is your work. So I hear the what, and I can get bogged down on the what. And I can feel attacked by the what. I can also feel attacked and bogged down by the how, so how they said it. So maybe there's a tonality there, maybe there's a body language there. So the what is the words that someone uses. The how is how it's said, both in tonality, in body language, in posture, etc., etc. But below the what and the how, there's the why. Why are they saying what they're saying? And if we can get to that, we can start to communicate on a deeper and more human level. We can start to understand the people around us and the people not so close to us. We can start understanding other people on a deeper level. So partner says, you never take time for me. You prioritize your work over everything else. You're obsessed with your work. And I feel attacked because of what they've said and how they've said it. But then if I can go that layer deeper and I can ask, why are they saying what they're saying? And I can step into their worldview and I can get to the why. Maybe I start to reflect on it and say, wait a second. Okay, well, one of the things they fear is maybe they grew up in a house where their parents were working all the time. It didn't take much time for them. So maybe one of the fears that they have in life is the fear that they're going to grow up with a similar partner who doesn't take time for them. And they don't want that. So they're afraid of that. So they're communicating from this place of fear. They're communicating from their worldview. And they're using words that to me feel like an attack because they're attacking the fact that I'm never there for them. But again, when I'm willing to see through their worldview, I'm like, wait a second. They value connection. So they want that value. And they fear a lack of connection. And me not being at home and not communicating that I'm not coming home, and me being at work all the time makes them feel like I'm not a priority. And now I'm starting to get a bit of perspective. Again, it doesn't make one person right or wrong. It just helps to be able to understand beyond the black and white, you're right or I'm right, you're wrong or I'm wrong, and just to be able to start to understand one another. So that's the first idea. Understanding worldview. We all have a different worldview. We'll probably never fully understand anyone in this world because we've all lived such different lives and had different interpretations of things that have happened in our lives. We all have different values. We all have different fears, but ultimately they come back to similar things. We want to be accepted. We want to be fulfilled. We want to live authentically. We all fear judgment, ridicule, abandonment, rejection, all these different things. But again, we meet our values and we look to avoid our fears through different means. We all have different defense mechanisms to keep us safe. We all have different strategies for helping us feel fulfilled. But if we can start to work with that little framework of the what, the how, and the why, and we can quickly get to, I wonder why the person is saying what they're saying in the tone that they're saying it. I wonder what they're afraid of, or I wonder what the value they have that's being threatened is. That can be really, really useful. Second idea around this, going beyond the worldview, and kind of a similar piece, is for upgraded communication, we need to check our expectations. We need to be aware of our expectations. So with everyone seeing the world through a different set of eyes, there's a tendency sometimes to make the assumption that you, quote unquote, should see the world through the same eyes as me. You should like the same things as me. You should communicate in the same way as me. And we have expectations. So we have stories in our heads about how other people should be showing up. The best way of demonstrating this, and I've talked about this many times on the podcast, is to look at the 5 love languages. This is specific to intimate relationships, but you could take this beyond that and use the same principles across all relationships. Gary Chapman was a wedding or couples therapist who wrote a book called The 5 Love Languages. And the 5 love languages looked at how so many couples get together and have this honeymoon period where things just work. No matter what happens, things just work. They click, they get on well, and so everything's easy and plain sailing. But then after a certain period of time, there's a drift and a disconnect. And what Gary Chapman observed was that there were expectations on both sides that were not being met in these relationships after a given time period. So he recognized that we typically have 5 ways in which we show love. There's obviously a lot more, but he kept it simple with 5 ways in which we show love, or we feel we receive love. So some of us, when we receive gifts, we feel very loved. When someone buys us a gift, we feel like, wow, someone's made all this effort. And it's not just a materialistic thing. It's the fact that someone's gone to the effort of buying a thoughtful gift for us. That's how we experience love. For other people, when someone takes time for them, so quality time for them is something they really value. And that's how they feel loved. And again, maybe that's based on their fears and their core values. Maybe they value having someone who takes time for them. Maybe they fear someone who's going to be, away all the time. Other people value acts of service. So maybe when my partner cooks, or maybe when I do the garden, there's a feeling of love there, an act of service. Other people like words of affirmation. So when our partner uses kind words or nice words toward us, or just really compliments us and makes us feel good with their words, we feel love. So words of affirmation, approval, validation. And then the 5th and final is, always escapes me, physical touch. The 5th and final is physical touch. So when we receive physical touch, we feel loved. Now, what Gary Chapman found with these 5 love languages was when couples would drift apart after the honeymoon period, typically it was because I would assume that my partner has the same expectations as me. I would expect that their expectations are the same as mine. So if I love receiving gifts, maybe my assumption is, well, my partner should love receiving gifts. It makes me feel good. So obviously it should make them feel good. And so I buy my partner gifts, and I buy my partner gifts, and I buy my partner gifts, and they don't seem to reciprocate. They say thanks, but they don't really seem to, engage all that much. And I start getting frustrated because the story in my head now is I'm doing everything I can and they just don't seem to care. Now, meanwhile, my partner is sat opposite me and their love language, unbeknownst to me, is physical touch. And I'm not giving them physical touch, and they feel a frustration. And maybe their story is he thinks he can just spend this money and he thinks that's enough to keep me happy. But I want quality time, or I want physical touch, or whatever it might be. So we can start to see how, again, neither person is right or wrong. There's just a different expectation and a lack of understanding of what it's like to be in the other person's shoes. So that 5 love languages There's a quiz you can take if you are in a relationship and you wanted to find out what your love language is and what your partner's love language is. We all value all of these things, but just in different orders. And as you start to understand, again, when I start to understand that my partner likes physical touch, then I can start giving them physical touch and not assume that they just want the same as me. So this, again, is about finding perspective. And again, it goes beyond just intimate relationships and just looking at all relationships, all of our friendships, our colleagues, our family members, all the different people in our lives, and just that recognition that not everyone sees the world through the same eyes as we do. Not everyone has the same values. Not everyone has the same motivators in life, or motivators in life, I suppose. So first idea, worldview, recognizing that we all have a different worldview. Second idea is just recognizing where we're getting caught up in expectations, assuming that other people should be seeing the world through our worldview. Again, creating that space and seeing the difference. Third idea around upgraded communication is to recognize what part of you is showing up in your communication. And that'll change all the time. So here's what I mean when I talk about the different parts. Recently I had Dick Schwartz on the podcast, Richard Schwartz. I can't remember what episode number it was, but Richard Schwartz is the founder of IFS, Internal Family Systems, which is a means of therapy, or an amazing form of psychotherapy, that looks at the different sub-personalities that we all have and working with those different sub-personalities to better understand ourselves. So put really simply, the idea is that in our younger years, we'll all have experienced things that were traumatic or overwhelming. Trauma is not the situation that happened, it's what's left in the body after what happened. Okay, so trauma is not the car accident, it's what's left in my body after the car accident, or whatever else it might have been. But there's things that happen to us in our younger years and our older years that are overwhelming, and as a means of protecting ourselves, with IFS, they say that that part of us freezes in time. So maybe I'm bullied in school. This is the example I often use as a simple means of explaining. If I'm bullied in school as a kid and it's very overwhelming for me, that part of me freezes in time, just not able to handle the situation. And so that 10-year-old part of me freezes. And these sub-personalities come out to protect me. So for some people, the sub-personality is that maybe I become the loner. And so by becoming the loner, I don't expose myself to other people, and so I can't be bullied now. Or for someone else, maybe they become the funny guy, because if I'm the funny guy, people aren't going to bully me anymore. Or maybe I become the tough guy, because then people are definitely not going to bully me. And so these different defense mechanisms start to form, and these different sub-personalities start to come in with different motivations. And they serve their purpose. They keep us safe maybe as children, but then as we come into our adult lives, we might notice that we seem to act in ways that just don't support how we want to show up in the world. Another example, maybe as a boy, I cry in school and I'm ridiculed by the other boys in the class and told the boys aren't supposed to cry, and I'm made fun of. And so the defense mechanism and the sub-personality that forms again is the tough guy, and I decide I'm never going to show emotion again. And so I become really tough and I fight anyone who makes fun of me or looks at me funny. But then I find myself 20 years later finding it really difficult to access my emotions because that sub-personality is still trying to keep me safe. And so the reason I bring this up as the third idea around upgraded communication is to recognize, when we start to recognize our triggers. So when we're in communication and we start to get emotional responses that we feel in our body, we start to feel discomfort, we start to feel dis-ease, we start to feel triggers in the body. Maybe I feel a tightness in my stomach, and just even having that awareness of what is going on in my body as I get into uncomfortable conversations, or I feel threatened in some way, or I feel ridiculed, or I feel judged in some way. Just recognizing what's going on, and then starting to recognize, I wonder what's alive in me in this moment. So what I mean by that is, I'm now a 33-year-old man that's fully capable of doing a lot of things in the world. But sometimes there's conversations where I feel I'm being rejected, or I feel I'm being ridiculed, or I feel I'm being judged, or I feel I'm being bullied, or I feel I'm being taken advantage of. And very quickly, the 33-year-old Pat can disappear and revert back to this 10-year-old or 8-year-old that was bullied as a kid, or even younger, the 6 and 7-year-old that was bullied as a kid. And I can start to feel very scared, and then my defense mechanisms start to come out. And so my defense mechanisms might be, again, to push people away. My defense mechanisms might be to be a people pleaser and keep everyone happy. And so it's interesting just to recognize, again, in our communication, particularly in the conversations that are uncomfortable or are difficult or are challenging, or where we notice our triggers come up, just to stay connected to ourselves. And just to recognize when we're actually coming from the place of who you are in that moment. So am I acting from a place of wholeness? I'm 33-year-old Pat, capable of doing lots of things in life. I can respond to this situation by taking a breath, recognizing what's going on within me, slowing things down, and then responding in an appropriate way. Or am I going to be reactionary? Am I going to panic, revert back to that younger self, go to my old defense mechanisms that kept me in loops, and show up based on memories and projections rather than on what's actually happening? It can often be the case that maybe we meet somebody new and they remind us of someone from our past. Or maybe you come out of a relationship and then you meet someone new and something they do triggers a response for you to think, oh, this is the same person I've just come out of a relationship with. And you start acting in the same ways you did in your last relationship rather than being present to what's happening in the moment. So third idea, there's a little bit more obviously to this one, but it starts with just recognizing what are my defense mechanisms and what are the things that trigger these defense mechanisms. Or you could go the opposite way and you could start looking at what are some of the things that trigger me. I get triggered when I feel I'm not given credit for the things that I do in the workplace and somebody else get the credit. Okay, where does that come from? And how do I react or respond when it happens? What else triggers me? I get triggered when I have to stand up in front of a group and speak and present. And I feel like people are judging me. Okay, what's your first memory of being judged and what defense mechanisms did you form? And just becoming more aware can be really useful. So again, first three ideas, I'm going to be sharing 6, but first 3 ideas. And I know there's a lot in this. So hopefully there's just a couple of things that are resonating on some level and maybe you'll be able to become more aware of and might be useful to you. So the first thing was, again, this worldview recognition. We all have a different worldview. Well, to understand other people's worldview, we need to go beyond the what and the how of what they're saying. We need to go beyond the words and the way in which they're saying things and question, I wonder why they're saying what they're saying. What is that motivated by? What are the values and the fears that are motivating their words? That was worldview. Second idea we looked at was expectations. Am I getting caught in assuming the other person should? Catching that word, should is always an expectation. Am I assuming the person should see the world through the same eyes as me, or am I giving them a chance to have their own unique experience? Again, think about the 5 love languages on that one. Third idea, who's showing up? So again, is it the adult version of you that's showing up, or is it the scared child? So just recognizing your triggers, starting to come to understand, maybe through journaling, some of your defense mechanisms, and just recognizing when those patterns are coming up, not being afraid to take a step back, take a couple of breaths, and then respond rather than react. Fourth idea around upgraded communication is the exploration of nonviolent communication. Again, Nonviolent Communication is an amazing book that came out from Marshall Rosenberg. I know some people don't like the term nonviolent communication, so they might call it compassionate communication. But ultimately what this looks at is expressing our feelings and our needs. Expressing our feelings and our needs. So we can come back to that example I used earlier where I said that there will be the example of my partner comes home from work. They're frustrated because they feel I'm not taking time for them. And the way that they communicate is in what Marshall Rosenberg would consider a violent way, by pointing the finger. So they say to me, you never take time for me. You make your work more important than me. You don't care about anyone else. You only care about your work. And so in that moment, obviously, I feel very attacked. It's quite violent in the way that it's communicated. So the concept with nonviolent communication is that I stay with my feelings and I stay with what's going on for me. And I stay with observations rather than judgments. So the basic breakdown of nonviolent communication is to recognize and state what you've observed, then state how it made you feel, then state your need, and then make a request. So an example of that same scenario might be to say, I've noticed that you're spending a lot more time at the office. You're doing a lot more than the 40 hours that you were doing up until recently. You seem to be in there until 9, you've been home at 9 o'clock every evening this week. It makes me feel sad that we don't get to spend more time together. I need to feel like I'm a priority in your life. Would it be possible for you to finish up a little bit earlier, a couple of days a week? So what's happened there is there's an observation. I've noticed that you come home from work a couple of hours later every evening. So that's something that's happened. It's not a judgment. It's just something that's been observed. I've expressed my feeling. I feel sad. So it's not you made me feel sad. It's I feel sad that we don't get to spend more time together. Then putting your need on the table. So you recognize your own need. What do I need? I need to feel like I'm a priority. So I need to get to spend more time with you. And then a request as opposed to a demand. So the request is, would it be possible for you to come home a little bit earlier a couple of times a week? So maybe even in that short example, you can start to see how that might be beneficial. So again, nonviolent communication goes from pointing the finger and saying, you made me feel, or making judgment toward other people, or making assumptions about what other people are trying to do in their behaviors, and instead sticking to what we're feeling and what we need, being able to communicate what we need. So how do I feel and what do I need? I think that kind of constantly checking in with that is really useful. How do I feel? What do I need? I've talked about this in terms of our own emotions recently. I feel lonely. What do I need? I need connection. I feel sad. What do I need? I need rest. I feel overwhelmed. What do I need? I need calm. So just checking in on those things. And then when it comes to communication, how do I feel? I feel disrespected. Disrespected, maybe not a feeling as much as it is an interpretation. Maybe I feel sad because my interpretation is that my partner is disrespecting me by not listening to me. So I feel sad. And again, I can communicate that. So rather than you never listen to me, I feel sad. I need to feel like my voice matters and that you're interested in what I have to say. And then maybe a request on that. Again, the nonviolent communication piece is a whole book, chapter, system, podcast in itself. There's a lot in it. But how you might start with that is just to start recognizing when you feel like criticizing your partner or your friends or your family or anyone in your life, you feel like criticizing and pointing the finger, or you feel frustrated about something, just checking in, and before using the words and pointing the finger, just checking in with the need. So my criticism maybe is my partner, what's my imaginary partner? What's my criticism? I might say my partner takes more time for their friends than they do for me. They're always out with their friends. They never want to go out with me. So that's my criticism. So again, I want to check in on my need there. What's my need? I need to feel like my partner wants to spend time with me. Okay, so I'm recognizing the need there. I need to feel like I'm good enough. I need to feel seen. I need to feel appreciated. Okay, I need to feel appreciated. So I've gone from now criticizing to now being able to go from you never take time for me to maybe being able to express, it makes me sad that we don't spend much time together. I need to feel like I'm important in your life. Kind of a different thing. It puts the other person in a place where they can respond rather than them feel attacked. Because again, when they feel attacked with the you made me feel, they're instantly going to go to a defense mechanism, and they're going to go to the old patterns that we talked about in the last piece. So again, observation. Here's what I've noticed. Feeling. Here's how it made me feel. Expressing the need. Here's what I need. And then making a request. Would it be possible? I think it's an amazing system. Even on those couple of simple tips, I've had people that have listened to the podcast in the past or come to seminars and just taken that on and say if it's really changed the way they communicate with their partner. Fifth idea. Two more ideas here. So fifth idea is the idea of reflective listening. I know I've touched on this again in the podcast. I feel a lot of this is repetition, but maybe a little bit more context as I share these. Reflective listening is something I've noticed. Obviously, I noticed it in myself first. It was brought to my attention myself first of being quick to kind of share my experience. When someone would share something they were doing, I'd come back with my experience. So maybe someone would say to me, I went to a concert last night and it was amazing. And the way I thought that I would relate to that person would be to say, I was at a concert recently as well. It was amazing, and go straight to my experience and not give the other person the space that they need. And a lot of us fall into that trap of this, I think it's called biographical listening, where we're listening from a place of our experience. So when someone says they've been to Bali, we're thinking about when we were in Bali, or we're thinking about what our last holiday was, or we're thinking about when someone's got a struggle or a challenge, we're thinking about our experience with struggle and challenge and giving advice from our perspective. And so reflective listening is more about being really present and really listening to what's being said by the person. And again, stepping into their shoes and maybe reflecting back what you hear. So giving them the space to actually express and really just allow them a space rather than having to fill the time, and rather than having to respond with your experience, just allowing them to better understand their experience. I haven't gone to Mass in years, but I remember going to Mass as a kid, and then one of the priests had expression where he said we've got 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason so that we can listen more. But the reflective piece could be, whether someone's struggling or they're sharing their wins, just giving them the space to really say what they need to say. And then you can reflect back what you heard. So at first it might sound a bit robotic, but as you become more comfortable with it, you find your own way of doing it. So maybe someone says, I'm really overwhelmed at the moment. There's a lot going on at work. I'm just struggling to balance things at home. I feel like I'm dropping the ball. I should be the man of the house and I just can't keep it together. I'm really struggling. Again, maybe the instant response and the response that we think in that scenario is needed is to offer advice or offer solutions or offer condolences or whatever it might be. Instead, we might just reflect back. Okay, so what I hear you say is that you're overwhelmed at the minute. There's a lot going on. You're just feeling like you're not able to show up in the way that you want to show up. Is there more? That question at the end, is there more, can be really useful. Because what it allows the other person to do, first you're making sure when you reflect back to someone what you've heard them say, you're making sure that what they said is, or what you heard is what they said. Because sometimes what someone says is different to what we hear. Because again, we hear things through our experience. So sometimes we jump to assumptions, we jump to conclusions. So reflecting back just allows us to be clear on what's been said. And then that question at the end, is there more? Allows them the space to say more. And if you've ever had this experience with a therapist or a counselor where they reflect back what you've said, sometimes you're thinking, wow, I didn't even realize that was what I was experiencing. I might have said it, but as I hear you say it back, it feels even clearer to me. So again, this reflective listening piece, biting our tongue and not feeling the need to share our experience, not feeling the need to fix, not feeling the need to offer solutions, not feeling the need to do anything other than hold space and create space. I was talking to someone recently and they were talking about therapists, and we were saying sometimes when the therapist hands you a tissue, they're handing the tissue for themselves because they're uncomfortable with you crying. They're not doing it for you. They're doing it because they feel uncomfortable in that moment. Rather than giving you the space to cry and have your experience, they'd shut it down. That's not a knock on therapists. That's something we all do. We feel uncomfortable when other people express their emotions, and maybe we feel the need to fix or they feel to make things more comfortable in that moment. But again, one of the things that's most important, I think, in communication is just creating space for someone to better understand themselves. And again, we create that space by reflecting back what we hear, by encouraging the person to elaborate, by checking in to make sure that what they're saying is what we're hearing and what we're hearing is what they're saying, and there's not a disconnect there. Because sometimes maybe we're jumping to a conclusion. Maybe they express a concern or a challenge that they're having and we think, oh yeah, I've been through that. I experienced this recently where I was saying I was burnt out and I was overwhelmed and I was lonely, and people were emailing me and they say, oh, I've been through that and here's what you need to do and here's what you need to do. And it's not what people want to hear when they're struggling. And so the reflective piece really makes people feel like they're being seen, they're being heard, they're being appreciated, they're being respected, they're being given space, they're being given a safe place. Safety is so important, and people feel safe when they're given space to express what's going on for them and not be judged and not be in a place where they feel they have to be fixed or they have to be different to how they are. So idea number 5, reflective listening. Reflecting back what you hear in your own words, checking assumptions, making sure you're not jumping to a conclusion that's not true, and then offering the space and offering the opportunity to ask, is there more? Is there more to that? What else is going on for you? Again, not trying to fix, not trying to judge, not trying to label, not trying to make things right. Just trying to create space. 6th and final idea for today. Hope today's episode has been useful. Again, I haven't done a solo cast in quite a while. I feel very rusty, so feedback is always welcome. support@pattively.com. I'll put all the negative feedback in the bin. Jokes. 6th and final idea for now on upgraded communication is making the implicit explicit. Making the implicit explicit. We often make assumptions. At least I often make assumptions. So I might assume that the other person's having a really good time. Maybe we're out for lunch and I assume the other person's having a really good time. And maybe they're bored out of their mind. But my assumption is they're having a good time. And so this idea in communication of making the implicit explicit, it might be in that scenario to say, I just want to put it out there and just, make the implicit explicit. I'm really enjoying this lunch. I'm really enjoying spending time with you. So it's kind of checking in assumptions and taking something that kind of lives in our imagination, bringing it out into the world and just making sure that it's clear and that it's normal. It creates safety. One of the things I recognized growing up was I would have an anxiety around a lack of communication. If there was a lack of communication in my interactions with family or with friends or whoever it might be, and I didn't know what was going on, it would make me feel a little bit anxious. And then maybe a couple of months after something had happened, maybe I'd gotten in trouble in school or I'd done something wrong, and it would be kind of brushed under the rug. And then it would be brought up months later. If that ever happened, it made me feel anxious. It made me feel a lack of safety because there was too much mind reading going on. There wasn't enough of the implicit being made explicit. And so I think it's really useful to take the things that we're either trying to hide or we're trying to bury or we feel awkward about or we feel this tension and just clear things a little bit. Not sure how well I'm explaining this, but this could be lots of things. Maybe I have to cancel lunch with a friend and I feel a little bit of guilt about that. And, I say, hey, we'll rearrange it. Maybe when I go for lunch, there's a little part of me that still feels guilty that I cancelled and I flaked on that person the week before. So making the implicit explicit in that moment might be to say, I just want to put it out there. There's a part of me that feels guilty that I cancelled last week. And I know you said it was fine, but I just want to say there's still a part of me that feels that. And it just gets it off your chest. And when there's something that we're holding and we might feel we're hiding it well, the other person can always tell. The other person always knows what's going on. And so it's just taking that stuff that's there and just bringing it out into the open. Maybe I'm noticing a resentment or a tension from someone that I'm close to. And again, making the implicit explicit. Is it okay with you if I share something? So again, asking for permission there. Please share. I've noticed in our last couple of interactions, it feels like there's a little bit of tension there. Maybe I'm reading things wrong. I just wanted to make the implicit explicit. You obviously don't have to use any of this language, but I just wanted to put it out there and just see if everything's okay. And maybe in that moment you feel a heaviness lift. Maybe they say, well, actually things are not okay. You did this and it's really annoying me, but you're giving them the space to bring that to the table. Or maybe they say, yeah, I've had a lot going on, but it just lifts that kind of, that low level anxiety or tension that's sometimes there when we're not communicating well with one another. Another way we can make the implicit explicit is just to bring our stuff to the table and give context. I think context is really important. The example I give on this is if you were to imagine you own a restaurant and your staff come in and generally they're quite good and they're doing a great job, but then one of your staff comes in and she's just a bit rude and she's just not even rude, but she's just not her chirpy self. She seems kind of short with people, a little bit blunt. She's not warm, she's not enthusiastic, she doesn't seem to want to be there. And you start getting worked up. You're thinking, this is my restaurant, I'm paying them a lot of money to work, there's a lot of other people that could step into this job, whatever it might be. And you start getting frustrated toward that person. Unbeknownst to you, again, different worldview, they've got lots going on at home and they've just had a really rough night. There's been a lot going on. They're juggling a lot of stresses and really looking after the people around them at home, and they're just wrecked. Now, to give context, if that staff member was to come in the morning and just be able to pull the boss aside and say, hey, I just want to provide a bit of context. Again, you wouldn't have to use this language, but I've got a lot going on at home. I'm a little bit tired today. I'm not, there's nothing wrong. Everything will be okay, but I just wanted to make that clear that this is what's going on. You obviously, as the owner, are going to see things completely different in that moment. You're not going to see them as someone who's taking their job for granted and someone who's being ignorant to people in the workplace or whatever. You're going to see them as another human on the journey who's struggling a little bit. And so for ourselves as well, when we're feeling overwhelmed, maybe we can bring that to the table. Maybe you go out for lunch with a friend and maybe you just give context. You just say, hey, I notice I'm a little bit lacking in presence. I'm worried about a job interview I've got on tomorrow. So I just want to put that out there. I'm just a little flustered in this moment. And even by getting that off your chest, again, making the implicit explicit, making the unseen seen, making the unconscious conscious, you just feel this weight lift. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'll quickly recap these 6 ideas. Maybe there's one you heard that was useful. maybe this was a load of shaffage and you struggled to follow my ramblings. But I've enjoyed sitting down in front of the mic again and getting back into a solo cast. Hopefully it's something now that's going to happen on the regular. First idea was recognizing that we all have a different worldview, and this idea of going beyond the words. There's what people say, there's the tonality and the way in which they say it. But much more important than what and how they say things is why they're saying what they're saying. What is the motivation behind someone's words? What is the motivation behind someone and how they communicate? Generally, it comes down to defense mechanisms around their fears and things that they value and want to move toward. So recognizing the worldview, not trying to change other people's worldview, but taking a step up from the table, walking around to where they're sat and trying to see things through from where they're sitting. Second thing we talked about was expectations, not falling into the trap of expecting other people to have the same worldview as us. Again, think about the 5 love languages. We all demonstrate love in different ways. We all receive love in different ways. We all have different motivations, drivers, fears, ambitions, etc., etc. And again, catching our expectations. Okay, maybe I'm angry at my friend because they haven't been in regular contact with me recently. Okay, so what's happening there? Well, I have an expectation that my friend should be in regular contact with me all the time. Maybe their expectation is that we're those type of friends that we might not see each other for a month and then we get on great. So we might just have a difference in expectation. That can be a big source of stress in communication. So finding perspective, going beyond expectations. Third idea was about recognizing who's showing up. So in moments where we get triggered or we feel we're being attacked in some way or judged in some way, we can often notice our defense mechanisms start to surface. And just taking a breath, taking a step back, and maybe recognizing the origins of that. Okay, so what's the story I'm telling myself in this moment? The story I'm telling myself is this person in front of me doesn't respect me. Okay, what's my first memory of feeling disrespected in an interaction with someone? Oh, well, I was 10 and, I stood up and I asked my teacher for help and they told me to sit down. Okay, that's my first. Okay, so now I've turned into the 10-year-old in this interaction. I want to take a breath and I want to show up like an adult here. So recognizing who's shown up. Fourth idea was around nonviolent communication. So again, rather than taking out our frustrations and our criticisms by pointing the fingers and saying, you made me feel, we have the 4 parts of observing what happens, stating our feeling and owning our feeling, expressing our need, and then making a request. So again, you never make any time for me becomes, I've noticed in the last couple of weeks, you're working much later in the evenings. Generally, you don't get home till after 9 o'clock. Then we express the feeling. I feel sad that we don't get to spend as much time together as we used to. Then express the need. I need to feel like I'm a priority in your life. And then request. Could I request or could I ask that maybe some evening this week you get home early and we go out for dinner? A very different interaction to you never make time for me. Fifth idea was around reflective listening. So again, recognizing that there is a tendency for a lot of us, I'm not pointing the finger at anyone, I'm the worst for this, is to jump straight to our own experience. So someone tells you about what's going on for them. Maybe it's a challenge they're going through, and we jump straight into trying to offer solutions before we even understand what they're really experiencing. Or maybe they tell you about something amazing happened in their life, and then you want to share what's amazing in your life before giving them the space and giving them the respect to really hear what they're saying. So again, one of the ways we can do this is reflect back what we hear and just check that what we're hearing is the same as what's been said and there's not a disconnect there. And then like a really nice question of, is there more? Okay, so they express what's going on for them. They're overwhelmed, they're stressed, they're juggling lots of things. Is there more? Maybe they get to say, well, there is more, this and this and this. So creating that feeling of safety that someone can really express themselves and be honest and communicate from a clear place. Sixth idea was to make the implicit explicit. Again, that can look in different ways. One of the ways is to give context to your situations. If you are stressed and you find yourself struggling to be present in your interactions with a friend or a family member, rather than trying to hide it and push it down and suppress it, maybe you can just bring it to the table. You can say, I'm noticing I've experienced a lot of stress the last couple of days. I'm struggling a little bit to be present. Please don't think it's anything to do with you, and feel a weight lift off my shoulders saying that. Or maybe it's, again, checking the assumptions, and maybe you're on a date and you're saying, I'm actually having a really good time here. I don't know about you. I'd be interested to hear how your experience has been. I don't know, is that a weird thing to say on a date? Don't take dating advice from me, but making the implicit explicit. So there's 6 ideas. Thank you as always for listening. I hope this episode has been enjoyable. I would always welcome shares over on social media. I'm on an extended social media break, which I'm enjoying. But if you're on Instagram, please do share it out. You can also support the show by leaving a review on whatever podcasting platform you listen to. And of course, you can support the show sponsors, Apollo Health and Wellness and Ethos CBD. Thank you as ever for listening. Hope you're staying well. Hope you're looking after yourselves. Again, you can check out the information for my upcoming shadow work workshop, which is happening online August 28th, and also my 2 retreats, which are happening in September and October, 3-day retreats. One is a men's retreat, the other is a mixed retreat. Really looking forward to those. Thank you again. Look after yourselves, and I'll speak to you soon.